galaxy runs on efficiency. Every spacefaring species has, through the relentless pressure of evolution, optimized their biological processes to minimize waste. They've eliminated redundant organs, streamlined metabolic pathways, and, most importantly, overcome the need for extended periods of unconsciousness. The very concept of sleep was considered a primitive evolutionary stage that advanced species had long since transcended, which is why humans, with their baffling requirement to spend approximately one-third of their lives completely vulnerable and unaware, were regarded with a mixture of pity and condescension by the galactic community. They just shut down for 8 consecutive hours? First observer Tazrel of the Xorellian Empire couldn't keep the incredulity from his harmonic voice patterns as he reviewed the reconnaissance data. His species had evolved from hive-dwelling arthropods whose biological efficiency was legendary even among the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Correct, replied Science Director Venmora, her sensory appendages rippling with what translated roughly as academic fascination. They call it sleep and claim it's necessary for their neural function. Their scientists insist this unconscious state somehow organizes information and maintains cognitive health. Convenient excuse for an obvious evolutionary failure. Tazrel's mandibles clicked dismissively. One-third of their lives wasted in vulnerability. No wonder they've expanded so slowly compared to the unified species. The Xorellian High Command had been monitoring human expansion with increasing interest. These strange bipeds had emerged from their home system only 2 centuries ago, barely a moment in cosmic terms, and had established a modest sphere of colonies along the galactic arm adjacent to Xorellian space. Their technology was unremarkable, their military presence minimal, and their biological inefficiency apparent. Most importantly, they controlled several resource-rich systems that would accelerate the Empire's ongoing expansion by at least 3 decades. The decision to incorporate human territory was made with the clinical detachment of beings who saw themselves as simply following evolutionary imperatives. The Xorellians weren't cruel, cruelty was inefficient, but neither were they burdened by concepts like empathy for biologically inferior species. Their strategic analysis was simple. Humans spent one-third of each planetary rotation cycle unconscious and defenseless. The optimal approach was equally obvious. We will initiate simultaneous operations during their primary sleep cycles, War Strategist Kivzol announced to the assembled command staff. Planetary defenses are automated but rudimentary. Ground resistance will be minimal with most of their population unconscious. This should be a textbook resource acquisition with minimal expenditure of Xorellian lives. When human diplomatic channels detected the Xorellian fleet movements and requested clarification, Ambassador Lauren Matsuda attempted to establish dialogue. The conversation was brief and unsettling. "We have observed your species' biological inefficiency," the Xorellian diplomatic interface stated without preamble. "Your requirement for regular unconsciousness makes your continued independent existence an inefficient allocation of galactic resources. The Xorellian Empire will optimize these resources under our stewardship." "If you're referring to human sleep patterns," Ambassador Matsuda replied carefully, "I should clarify that sleep isn't a weakness, but a necessary biological process for our cognitive function. Perhaps we could arrange a cultural exchange to better understand our respective physiologies." "Understanding is unnecessary for optimization," came the response before communications terminated. Dr. Maya Kapoor watched the diplomatic exchange from her laboratory at the Circadian Neuroscience Institute on Europa. As humanity's leading researcher on comparative sleep physiology, she had spent the past decade studying how human sleep patterns differed from other sentient species. Her findings had been fascinating but largely ignored by military and political leadership as interesting but impractical scientific curiosities. "They're making a fundamental mistake," she told her research team as they prepared emergency data packets for military command. "They think sleep is a vulnerability when it's actually a control mechanism." Her colleague, Dr. Abernathy, looked up from his neural mapping console. "They're not going to understand that distinction, Maya, not without the evolutionary context." "Then we need to make them understand," she replied, forwarding her most recent research findings to Fleet Command with an urgent priority tag. "Because if they prevent humans from sleeping en masse, they have no idea what they're about to unleash." The Xorellian attack came precisely as their strategists had planned. Coordinated strikes during the night cycles of three human colony worlds, Novalis, Archer's Landing, and New Hokkaido. Orbital defenses were neutralized with surgical precision. Dropships deployed occupation forces to major population centers. Citizens were rounded up from their homes, many still disoriented from being awakened. Resistance was sporadic and quickly contained. By all conventional metrics, the invasion was a resounding success. Within 36 hours, all three colonies were under Xorellian control, with minimal casualties on either side. War strategist Kivzol received commendations for the operation's efficiency. The first anomalies appeared on day 3. The human prisoners are displaying unusual behaviors, reported security coordinator Jexnar from Novalis. Those who have been continuously processed and therefore prevented from entering their sleep cycle are showing elevated neural activity and physiological stress markers. Expected responses to captivity, Kivzol dismissed, continue processing. By the 72-hour mark, the reports became more concerning. Human prisoners who had been kept awake for interrogation and processing were exhibiting symptoms beyond normal stress responses. Some appeared to respond to questions before they were asked. Others seemed aware of events occurring elsewhere in the detention facilities. Most disturbing were the synchronized behaviors. Captives with no possible means of communication, moving or speaking in perfect unison. On New Hokkaido, a detention center experienced a power failure that security systems couldn't explain. When emergency lighting activated, guards discovered that all human detainees were standing in precise geometric formations, facing the same direction, completely silent. When questioned, none could explain why they had arranged themselves this way. Dr. Kapoor, now working from a secure facility on Mars with military intelligence, reviewed the incoming reports with growing concern and validation. "It's happening exactly as our models predicted," she told Admiral Chen as they examined neural scans smuggled out by resistance operatives. "Extended sleep deprivation is breaking down the barriers." "What barriers?" the Admiral asked, studying the brain activity patterns that even he could see were abnormal. "The ones that sleep maintains," Dr. Kapoor explained. "Human consciousness is filtered. Sleep isn't just rest. It's a reset mechanism that keeps certain neural pathways dormant. Without it, those pathways begin to activate. Ancient pathways, evolutionary holdovers from before we became, well, what we consider modern humans. You're saying sleep deprivation is triggering some kind of atavistic response? I'm saying sleep evolved not to make us vulnerable, but to keep us contained." Dr. Kapoor pulled up comparative scans. "Look at these patterns. They're showing increased activity in brain regions we thought were vestigial. And here, these synchronization patterns between different subjects. They're not random. Are you suggesting these people are communicating somehow? Without technology? Not exactly communicating, more like sharing consciousness, becoming networked. The longer they go without sleep, the stronger the effect becomes. But it's unstable and ultimately dangerous to the individual." On day 5, the Xorellian command structure began experiencing what they classified as environmental anomalies. Communication systems functioned perfectly during diagnostics, but transmitted garbled information during actual use. Security protocols executed flawlessly in simulations, but failed during real applications. Most disturbing were the reports from field commanders who found their forces ambushed by resistance fighters who seemed to anticipate their movements with impossible accuracy. On Archer's Landing, Sub-Commander Residal led a containment operation against a suspected resistance cell. His forces surrounded the target building according to optimal tactical doctrine, only to find the building empty, and his forces surrounded instead by humans who appeared from concealed positions his scouts had certified clear minutes earlier. "How did you know our approach vector?" he demanded of the resistance leader as his forces were disarmed. The human, a woman with bloodshot eyes and a face gaunt from sleeplessness, smiled thinly. "You told us, not with words, but we heard you anyway." Similar scenarios played out across all three occupied colonies. Xorellian forces found themselves increasingly disoriented, their carefully planned operations disrupted by resistance fighters who move with uncanny coordination and seem to possess information they couldn't possibly have obtained. War strategist Kiv Zol, facing mounting reports of tactical failures, ordered a full neural and psychological evaluation of human captives. The results defied Xorellian understanding of sentient neurology. Humans deprived of sleep for more than 96 hours showed brainwave patterns that indicated simultaneous individual consciousness and some form of shared neural network. More alarming were the documented cases of humans influencing electronic systems through proximity alone, security doors malfunctioning, data systems displaying anomalous readings, communication devices transmitting without activation. This is not possible, Science Director Venmore insisted as she reviewed the findings. No evolved species would develop such capabilities and then suppress them through voluntary unconsciousness. It defies evolutionary logic. On Mars, Dr. Kapoor was explaining exactly that paradox to Earth's Unified Defense Council. Sleep isn't a bug in human neurology, it's a feature, she explained. Our ancestors developed these capabilities, limited forms of shared consciousness, heightened perception, even rudimentary electromagnetic influence, but they came with catastrophic costs to individual stability and social cohesion. Sleep evolved as the solution, a regular reset that suppresses these abilities while allowing the benefits of our complex brains. You're saying humans evolved to be less than we could be? General Okafor looked skeptical. I'm saying we evolved to be sustainable, Dr. Kapoor corrected. These abilities are emerging now because the Xorellians are inadvertently creating the perfect conditions for them. Mass sleep deprivation across concentrated populations experiencing similar emotional states. It's like a feedback loop, amplifying latent capabilities. Can we use this? The question came from Admiral Chen, ever the pragmatist. Dr. Kapoor hesitated. Theoretically, yes. We could implement controlled sleep deprivation protocols for special forces, keeping them in the window where these abilities emerge, but before psychological breakdown occurs. But it would be dangerous, and the long-term effects are unknown. Compared to alien occupation, I think we can accept some risks, the Admiral replied. Operation Hypnos deployed 7 days after the initial invasion. Special forces teams, carefully sleep-deprived under medical supervision, infiltrated all 3 occupied colonies. Their mission parameters were simple: disrupt Xorellian command and control, support indigenous resistance, and demonstrate that human territory would exact too high a cost to hold. What the Xorellians encountered defied their understanding of warfare. Human operatives moved through their security systems as if they were invisible. Strike teams coordinated without communications technology, responding to threats before they materialized. Some Xorellian commanders reported humans who could seemingly pass through solid barriers, though later analysis suggested this was more likely a form of perception manipulation, convincing observers they hadn't seen what was actually there. Most effective was the apparent ability of sleep-deprived humans to disrupt Xorellian technology through proximity alone. Critical systems failed, weapons malfunctioned, vehicles shut down. The scientific explanation that humans were somehow sensing and influencing electromagnetic fields through biological means was less important than the psychological impact. The Xorellians began to fear these unpredictable creatures who violated the laws of biology as they understood them. The liberation of the colonies took less than 72 hours. The Xorellian retreat was not a rout. They were too disciplined for that, but it was decisive. Their after-action analysis contained a recommendation that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. Human territory should be considered a strategic exclusion zone, too costly to incorporate into the empire. In the aftermath, Dr. Kapoor faced her greatest challenge: safely returning thousands of sleep-deprived humans to normal cycles. Many had been awake for over 10 days, their minds now operating in states that defied conventional neurology. Some could communicate across vast distances. Others could perceive events before they occurred. A few demonstrated abilities that even Dr. Kapoor's models hadn't predicted, including influencing electronic systems with unprecedented precision. Will they go back to normal? Admiral Chen asked as they observed a group of Special Forces operatives who could apparently share sensory information without speaking. That's the wrong question, Dr. Kapoor replied. This is normal, just a different expression of human potential. But yes, with proper sleep protocols, the barriers will re-establish themselves. the abilities will subside. They'll return to their baseline consciousness. And if they don't want to, Dr. Kapoor's expression was grave. That's why sleep evolved in the first place. These abilities come at a cost. Extended consciousness sharing leads to identity dissolution. Continued perception beyond normal sensory limits causes psychological fracturing. The human mind isn't designed to operate in this state indefinitely. Sleep isn't just rest. It's the mechanism that keeps us ourselves. The galactic community's assessment of humanity underwent a radical revision, following what became known as the Xorellian miscalculation. Sleep was no longer viewed as an evolutionary weakness, but as a sophisticated control mechanism. Evidence that humans had evolved not from lesser to greater capabilities, but from dangerous instability to sustainable balance. Xorellian diplomatic channels reopened with a formal acknowledgement that territorial expansion into human space would not be pursued. Their communique contained a phrase that would become famous in human diplomatic circles. We recognize that human unconsciousness is not a vulnerability to be exploited, but a boundary to be respected. Other species, previously dismissive of humans as inefficient curiosities, began to view them with new caution. The idea that these bipeds spent one-third of their lives deliberately suppressing capabilities that other species had never developed was unsettling. More unsettling was the implication. What other aspects of human biology might serve similar containment functions? Dr. Kapoor continued her research, now with unlimited funding and interspecies collaboration. Her most cited paper, Sleep as Evolutionary Containment: The Paradox of Human Consciousness, became required reading in xenobiology programs throughout the galaxy. Its conclusion offered a perspective that changed how humanity was viewed among the stars. Perhaps the most advanced evolutionary adaptation is not the development of new capabilities, but the wisdom to know which capabilities must be kept in check. Humans do not sleep because we are weak. We sleep because what we become without it is too powerful to sustain. The galaxy, which had always valued efficiency above all else, began to consider that perhaps there was evolutionary wisdom in what appeared to be waste. And humans, who had always seen sleep as a necessary inconvenience, began to appreciate it as the thin boundary between civilization and something far more primal and powerful, a nightly return to being merely human rather than something both more and less.